see before you a sad calypso man, a very sad thing happened to me. It isn't like a calypso man to cry, but when you hear my trouble you'll see. If I had lost all my money and my wife run away, to a calypso man these things are small. But what happened to this calypso man is the saddest blow of all. This will break your heart. It makes me cry. I don't think I could tell you. Yes, I can. I lost the rhythm. I can hear the melody, the band is sweet, but gee, I'm just not with them. I lost the rhythm. Where is the drum beat? The trumpet player can be proud, at least he plays the music loud with some beat. But where's the drum beat? When I lose the beat, it's as though I were dead. The tune may be sweet, but my feet are like lead. Who cares for the tune when the music is hot? I gotta hear drums, or dance I cannot, so give me rhythm. Mister, you can play for me, the song can be in any key. Who cares if it's a symphony or pop? But I lost the rhythm. It's just as well this song is over, so I'll stop. We didn't rehearse the rolling down of the pants. Now, Ben Bagley's The Littlest Review, with material mostly by Ogden Nash and Vernon Duke, with additional materials provided by Sheldon Harnick, Charles Strauss, and Sammy Kahn, featured a cast that included Tammy Grimes, Charlotte Ray, and Joel Grey. The show opened on May 22nd, 1956, at the Phoenix Theater on 2nd Avenue and received very positive reviews. Joel Grey sang and danced in several ensemble numbers and was featured on 2 solos, including I Lost the Rhythm. Now, I actually saw Joel Grey perform live a few years ago at the Queensborough Performing Arts Center. And actually that location is run by a dear friend of mine who I attended the Hannah Kroner School of Dance with for many years. Well, I have to tell you, and maybe you know because perhaps you were there or perhaps you've recently seen Joel Grey perform. He was incredible. I sat there enthralled. And let me tell you, Joel Grey still floats on air. Build a stairway to paradise with a new step every day. I'm gonna get there at any price. Stand aside, I'm on my way. I've got the blues, and up above it's so fair. Shoot, they're gonna carry me there. I'll build a stairway to paradise with a new step every day. All you preachers who delight in being the dancing teachers, let me tell you there are a lot of features that'll carry you through the gates of heaven. It's madness to be always sitting around in sadness when you could be learning the steps of gladness. You'll be happy when you can do just 6 or 7. Begin the day, it's mighty nice. The quickest way to paradise. When you practice, here's the thing to do. Simply say as you go, I'll build a stairway to paradise with a new step every day. I'm gonna get there at any price. Stand aside, I'm on my way. I've got the blues, with a new step every day. I recall the time when we made these as very special and exciting, said Joel Gray recently, when referring to the CD re-release of 2 LPs, record albums. Remember those? One was from 1967, entitled Only the Beginning, and the other from 1969 called Black Sheep Boy. The recently re-released CD contains 33 songs, including It Was My Father's Fashion, If I Were a Carpenter, Both Sides Now, In My Life, You Ought to Be in Pictures, and I'll Build a Stairway to Paradise. Now, favorably reviewed on Joel Gray's birthday, believe it or not, in the April 11th, 1960 edition of Billboard magazine, his album, Songs My Father Taught Me, was a loving collection of 12 Jewish folk songs that Joel heard growing up. It reflected his deep appreciation for the music that surrounded his youth and of those that he dearly loved. Don't ever tell me that you've heard the cello until you have met Marianne. Don't talk of silver or violet or yellow until you have met Marianne. And so the one thing I'm positive of is that God made me one lucky man. Gentlemen, sorry, you won't know what love is until you have kissed Mary. Mary, fine as any name can be, but with propriety, society will say Marie, for it was Mary, Mary, long before the fashions came. And there is something there that sounds so fair. It's a grand old Billy-dee-dee-dee, two ladies, Billy-dee-dee-dee, two ladies, Billy-dee-dee-dee, and I'm the only man. Yeah, Billy-dee-dee-dee, they like it. Billy-dee-dee-dee, I like it. Billy-dee-dee-dee, this 2 for 1. We switch partners daily to play as we please. Twosies beats onesies, but nothing beats threes. I sleep in the middle, she's left and she's right. But there's room on the bottom if you drop in tonight. Billy-dee-dee-dee, two ladies, Billy-dee-dee-dee, two ladies, Billy-dee-dee-dee, and I'm the only man. Yeah, Billy-dee-dee-dee, I like it, Billy-dee-dee-dee, they like it, Billy-dee-dee-dee, this 2 for 1. Billy-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Never hear those songs combined like that ever again. Now, the song Marianne, beautiful, beautiful song, with music and lyrics by Jerry Herman, comes from the 1979 Broadway musical, The Grand Tour, starring Joel Grey as S.L. Jakubowski, the eternal refugee and survivor. Of his performance, Clive Barnes in the New York Post wrote, "Joel Grey is one of the consummate Broadway artists of our time." Now, Mary is one of the many unforgettable George M. Cohan songs that was used in the 1969 Broadway musical, George M., starring Joel Grey as that Yankee Doodle boy, and, of course, two ladies from the musical mega-hit Cabaret. Now, Joel Grey co-starred in a production of the play, No Time for Sergeants, in Wallingford, Connecticut, in May of 1958. The cast included a very talented and beautiful actress by the name of Jo Wilder. They had actually met at a party on the coast, and at the time, Joel was performing at clubs both in California and in New York. Well, on June 29th, 1958, Joel Grey married Jo Wilder. She was truly a stabilizing force in his life and career, and they were happily married for 24 years. Says Joel Grey, "Before I was married, I was scattered, but afterwards I was able to zero in on my acting projects." Jo Wilder was a native New Yorker whose grandfather was a rabbi from Brooklyn. Where are the Brooklynites? Now, as an actress and a singer, her theatrical background included leading in featured roles on Broadway and off, in the regional theater, and on television. Joel and Jo had a small, intimate wedding in New York City in the apartment of close friends, and they were married by a rabbi. The small wedding party then dined at Danny's Hideaway. They drank Italian wine, they ate lasagna, and they feasted on chicken cacciatore. By the way, in a, easy Pagano, easy. Such a paisan over there. By the way, in a recent interview on satellite radio, Joel Grey was asked what his favorite food was. His response, Italian. Now, for a time, the newlyweds lived in a little walk-up apartment in Greenwich Village. He appeared on Broadway as a replacement in Neil Simon's first big comedy hit, Come Blow Your Horn. And that was in 1961. And looking back on those years, Joel Grey remembers, "I call these years my replacement period." Now, Joel Grey's dramatic roles also include Marco Polo Sings a Solo at the Public Theater, the American Repertory Theater's production of Ibsen's When We Dead Awaken, Herringbone at the Hartford Stage, A Fool and Her Fortune, and the Roundabout Theater's production of Give Me Your Answer Due, for which he received a Drama Desk Award nomination. Joel also appeared in starring roles on Broadway in Half a Sixpence, succeeding Tommy Steele in 1965, and to even greater acclaim in Stop the World, I Want to Get Off. Thinking back to the 1960s, Joel Grey recalls, "Things were not going as I had hoped they would, and I seriously thought about quitting the business. I remember this time as my summer of discontent. What kind of fool am I who never fell in love? It seems that I'm the only one that I have been thinking of. What kind of man is this? An empty shell, a lonely cell in which an empty heart must dwell. What kind of clown am I? What do I know of life? Why can't I cast away this mask of play and live my life.
Maybe this time she'll stay.
Why can't I fall in love like any other man? And maybe then I'll know what kind of fool I am.
Maybe this time she'll stay.
Now, the Greys, as in Joel and Joe, had two children, two children. Jennifer Grey and James Grey, who is currently working as a chef in Southern California. As for Jennifer Grey, well, wrap your brain around this one. In the 1974 Broadway cast of Good Time Charlie, there happened to be a young, virtually unknown dancer who later changed his name to Patrick Swayze. He was born in 1952. He was 23 at the time he appeared with Joel Grey. Jennifer was born in 1960. She was 15. So there's a good possibility that they met during that very same production of Good Time Charlie. Now, the film Dirty Dancing was released in 1987. One could argue that Patrick Swayze's biggest claim to fame might have been dancing with the daughter of the same star that he danced with on Broadway. And, as I'm sure many of you know, Jennifer has been busy of late dancing with her own stars. However, her first real break came in 1986, when she played Matthew Broderick's sister in the hit film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And then, of course, in 1987, she was strutting her stuff in the film Dirty Dancing. Coincidentally, that film was set in a Catskill Mountains resort, the same kind of establishment where Joel Grey's father and grandfather began their careers. Now, Jennifer was engaged to Johnny Depp in 1988, and she briefly dated George Stephanopoulos in 1993. Well, you have to get your money's worth. I have to give you it. As for the ex-Mrs. Joel Grey, well, Joe Wilder continues to make a very, very, very good living.